You know what I love? I love it when a sponsor contacts me and I already love and recommend their brand. And what I love even more, the cherry on top, they're giving away over $150,000 in grants. Well, who's the company? It's Orgain Nutrition. They have Orgain grants for greater good because Dr. Andrew Abraham, who started the company, knows that sometimes to take your business to the next level, you need more than just the amazing idea that's going to change the world. You need money. Now, his story is pretty incredible. He had cancer in his teenage years and ended up beating it, especially with nutrition, which is why he actually wanted to take it to the world. And it hits really close to home for me right now because my kiddo's dad has stage 4 inoperable cancer, and it's insane to know how much nutrition plays a part. Orgain is organic. I use it all the time, especially in between millionaire interviews because it's convenient and actually good for you. And I think it's really important that everybody knows what their mission is. So if you are a startup, at least 2 years old or older in business, and you're in the meditation, mindfulness space, active lifestyle, nutrition, and the health and wellness, you could apply today before March 20th and get a chance at $50,000. They're picking 3 different businesses for $50,000 a piece so you can take your business to the next level. Make sure you check out orgain.com/grants with an S beforehand and apply today. I highly recommend the company in general, and thank you so much. Have an absolute amazing day. Enjoy.
Potent advice and inspiration from real self-made millionaires. Welcome to The Eventual Millionaire with your host, Jaime Masters.
Welcome to Eventual Millionaire. I'm Jaime Masters, and today on the show, we have Denise Gosnell. And what I think is amazing about her website is it's called The Vacation Effect. She's a multiple business owner, but she talks about actually taking away things, right? Going on vacation to build your business. So thanks so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Jaime. I'm excited to be here.
It seems so counterintuitive, and I do this for my clients, and they're like, wait a minute, I make them take vacations, right? Number one, it's good for your health, but number two, it makes them be a better business owner. So I would love to hear your theories, because I apparently already agree with you. What is the vacation effect?
Yeah, so the Vacation Effect is a company I started. I had always been somebody who wanted to have freedom. Like that's why we go into business for ourselves, right? Is to have freedom. But it always seemed like there was a trade-off. If I worked a lot of hours, I'd make more money, but I'd have no free time for my family. Or if I took a lot of free time for my family, I'd make no money. So it was always this balancing act that I never seemed to figure out. But long story short, I figured out after a series of life-changing incident and some things that woke me up to the fact that I just had to figure this out. I ended up realizing that I stumbled onto, after a scheduling experiment, that you can actually get as much done each week as you do when you're about to go on vacation. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, Jaime, but you know how like right before you go on vacation, you get like a month's worth of work done in the 2 days before you leave?
Totally.
You know what I'm talking about?
Definitely.
You felt that way? Yeah, I think everybody's felt that way before. And it's like, why is it that we feel that way? And well, what's happening is we're forcing ourselves to focus on what really matters. And so that's part of where the name, the Vacation Effect, comes from. It's that hyper efficiency that I call it, where you're super productive right before you go on vacation. But it's also, I believe that life should have so much joy that your life feels like a perpetual vacation and that you got space to do what makes you happy. You've got freedom. So the Vacation Effect actually has a double meaning. It's that hyper productivity and it's joyful life where life feels like a vacation. So I hope that makes sense.
It totally does. And all those burnt out business owners are going, wait, what? How do we, because you only do 3 days a week and you have 3 businesses. So tell us a little bit about the scheduling experiments and how you actually implement this, because it sounds like it's too good to be true.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where I had always dreamed of having a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. And what I mean by that is, I was a workaholic entrepreneur, had 3 companies, working 80 hours a week in those companies, like feeling like that was the only way I could get it done. That's what we've been taught to do in our North American business culture and, a lot of other countries as well. And so that's what I thought you do. And it had worked for me in the past, but it always came at a price. I was always burned out or unhappy. So I went to this meditation retreat, and the goal of what I wanted to have answered was, how can I have the Tuesday, Thursday schedule I'd always wanted, where I could just wake up on those days and say, hey, what do I want to do today that makes me happy? and like be able to run my company 3 days a week. That's what I'd always dreamed of. It's like a retirement goal or something. Like kind of sounds silly if we think about it. And the answer that I got in the meditation retreat was life changing. It was, Denise, all you have to do is decide and make today what you want tomorrow to be. So I'm like, okay, make today what I want tomorrow to be. Well, I can't just go from working 80 hours a week to working 3 days a week because I got 3 companies. There's no way. But there's this permission thing. I'm like, I'll give myself permission to do an experiment, a 30-day experiment. Surely my business won't fall apart if I give myself 8 business days in the next month that I can test out the waters on this idea. And so that's what I did. I went back, I rescheduled meetings. I carved out 8 business days. Mine happened to be Tuesdays and Thursdays, where I, was allowing myself to have that time. And it was interesting what happened. It was actually painful at first, Jaime. Like you said, like, how does that, how does it work? Like magically, like, well, no, it's not magic. It is, but it's not. Like, here's what I mean by that. So at first I realized, I had to figure out, okay, I used to work 6 days a week. Now I'm trying to fit it all into 3. So I learned that things had to go. You know how when you're about to go on vacation, some things just don't get done and you just literally have to decide, you know what, this is just going to be ignored. And most of the time it really could have been ignored anyway, but we just didn't let ourselves ignore it. So I had to learn what needed to be delegated, that I, as the CEO of these companies, of 2 of the 3 companies, wasn't delegating. I had to learn where I was wasting time with my meetings. I don't know about you, if you've ever done this in the past, or a lot of your listeners have as well, but I used to have meetings all over my calendar. I'd have meetings in the morning, meetings in the afternoon, meetings any day of the week. There was no criteria for when I would have a meeting and when I wouldn't have a meeting. And that was one of the first things that had to go in order to have my new 3-day work week. So it was like a lot of things. After that 30 days, I ended up extending it for another 30. Does that make sense so far?
Definitely. Okay. So it does feel like it would be very painful to have that yes versus no, because we're kind of sucky anyway at prioritizing things, right? It's like, wait, I need to do it all yesterday. So how do you manage what stays and what goes? Because I know some of it is delegation with your team, but some of it might just not be like, hey, now we're not doing this project anymore. And that's, especially for the overachiever mindset, that's a lot to ask.
Yeah, that's one of the most impactful things that I had to figure out. And I have an actual methodology that I use that I work with my private clients on. I'm happy to just kind of walk through that quickly if that is helpful. Yes. And so it starts with, how we typically will do a brain dump each day. And I don't know about you, but I normally have 10 or 15 things that are like my brain dump of the day, of things I'd like to get done or make sure somebody on my team is moving along or whatever the case is. And so, you do your little brain dump, and then the first part of that, and this is an interesting analysis, it's doing what people might think of as a Pareto Principle analysis. And for those listeners who may not know what the Pareto Principle is, the Pareto Principle is, it is said basically that 20% or 80% of the activities that you do tend to produce 20% of the results, which isn't much. Like 80% of the stuff that we do is really only producing 20% of the results. Now, these are on average, like it may vary a little bit, but it's also said that on average, 20% of the efforts, the things that we do, produce 80% of the results. It's like interesting statistic there, right? And so if 20% of our efforts really do produce 80% of the results, why are we not living in that zone all the time? Right.
Jeez.
And it's because, we're crazy busy. And like we have all these things we're juggling as business owners and trying to get it done. So step 1 in my process of how I manage my tasks each day is to do a Pareto analysis where I'm looking for the levers. I'm looking for, out of that 10 or 15 on the list, the 2 or 3 that are going to take the least amount of time, but they're going to produce the biggest results. And then guess what? If I do those first, before noon, ideally, and they might linger after early afternoon too, but if I do those first, even if I do nothing else today, I'm already successful in my day. So that's part 1 of the way I had to shift how I spent my time in order to maintain this 3-day work schedule without the company tanking, right? Without the 3 companies tanking. And then the second part of the analysis, and this is something I've never heard anyone else talk about, I call it hacking the hack. So I have these time hacks. I have 12 time hacks that, some of them people might use already, but they don't realize it's a time hack. But it's things like batching like tasks together, like responding to different emails at the same time, or doing the same kind of activity, like editing certain Word documents all together in bulk. You know what I mean? The same type of, so batching is one. Using a timer is another. Like this thing right here, I use this timer all the time. Well, so but I'm getting ahead of myself, but in terms of the list of that 10 to 15 things. So step one, we've already marked, like 1A, 1B, 1C. There's three big levers that we identified from our Pareto analysis. Now, step two is the hacking the hack. And that's where you look down the rest of the list and you say, okay, out of 2 through 15, which of these can I apply a time hack to help me get them done even faster? Does that make sense?
Yep.
So then you might say, you might write batch one next to the three things that could be batched together. You might write batch two next to the other things that could be batched together. You might write timer down next to a bunch of them. Sometimes I'll write timer and batch down next to them. There's a bunch of others. Like I said, there's 12 total that I use, but my most favorites are the batching and the timer. And so what you're then doing is you then go about your day. You then prioritize based upon the levers and the hacking the hack. And then you go about your day that way. Literally, if you just follow that and do nothing else of any of the other things that I cover in my programs, like that will get you like halfway there.
I love it. And you are one of 6 interviews today, so I totally get the batching because it's the same brain space, right? So my question is, though, especially when it doesn't come to meetings, because meetings are easy to me to batch because it's already pre-planned. But when it comes to actually doing stuff, especially if you feel inspired or not, right, at the beginning of the day, how do you get yourself to do some of it when you're like, oh, I'm way, our own minds, are not nice to us sometimes.
Yeah. So that's actually where I want to go back to forced hyper efficiency. So, I talked about how when you get ready to go on vacation, you force yourself to get it done because you're under a deadline and you're not going to be available. So you focus on what matters and you get it done faster. So for me, the way I get stuff done that otherwise might sit too long is I'll create an artificial or real deadline. And what I mean by that is sometimes I'll commit to somebody else. Like there's no greater way to get a client project done than to schedule a call with the client to review the project, even if you haven't started it yet. Like Seriously. It magically gets done, right?
Yep.
Same thing with like that, whatever that thing is that you've been putting off. Well, guess what? Commit to sending it to somebody to review because it's going to get done because you got to send it to them in order to have that meeting. So those are the games I play with myself all the time. And when I am already in reduced scheduling mode anyway, when I'm only letting myself when I'm not traveling, have my working in the trenches Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Notice we're having this call on a Wednesday. Mm-hmm. That's by design. Like that forces me to not mess around because I know tomorrow I'm not available to do it.
I love this.
So it's like these games we play with ourselves. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I love that you call them games. We run implementation retreats and we take something that would take 2 months or even longer and put it in 2 days because as long as we reduce the friction and what you're doing, we are way more effective than ever when you actually are focused on something, even from somebody that has ADD. So my question though is, how do you deal with small business owners? Because this is sort of what I always get. People are like, but we have urgent things that pop up in the business and I'm the only one that can deal with it. So what happens if on Thursday something urgent pops up in your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad you're clarifying that. So in order to make my reduced schedule work long-term, I had to put emergency buffers in place because, there are times when a true emergency happens. So on my freedom days, that's what I call the business days that I wake up and say, what do I want to do that makes me happy? On my Tuesday and Thursday, generally freedom days, I have a 2-hour emergency buffer. I generally set it between 2 and 4 Eastern time because that's just when I like to have it, or 3 and 5 Eastern time. But it's where I can respond to emergencies if it truly happens. But I only have that happen once a month on my 8 freedom days. Because what I define as an emergency has been refined over time.
Totally. And you can delegate actually and train the other people to deal with most things instead of you having to be the decision maker.
Exactly.
So you call them freedom days. So it's not like you can't work on the extra days that you have. So you still have the time available to work on stuff that you love that could be different, or what do you do on those freedom days?
Yeah, so for me, a freedom day is being able to wake up and say, what do I want to do today that lights me up? That I just can't wait to get out of bed and go do, makes me happy. And there's no resistance. It's total flow, total love. And my rule for myself in general is that I don't want it to be in the trenches of the company. But that doesn't mean I couldn't be writing a book or researching a new company I've always wanted to start, or going and visiting a family member, or taking a friend to lunch, or going to donate my time to a charity, or whatever that may be. It can be business or personal. My only rule is that it makes me happy and it's not in the trenches of my companies. Does that make sense?
Yes, it totally does. So I have so many questions when it comes to this too, because I was just got asked to speak at this event for all women business owners that are doing over 1 million. And they're like, ooh, is there a difference between female and male everyday productivity wise? Because we are different creatures, right? And so I would love your feedback on that too, because getting in flow and actually tapping into our creative power, I think is really huge. What do you see the difference between male and the female side for this?
That's a good question. I think females tend to, I think we tend to be more, we have more emotions involved too. Like we've got a lot of times we have more those that are parents are balancing, like the feelings of the whole family, the needs of the whole family. Not that men don't do that too, because my husband does that as well. But I'm more sensitive to those kinds of things. Like, how is my daughter feeling about these things, or how's the family feeling? So I think that females bring a more sensitive side to the drive as well. Like, we were very driven. But like, I think females in a lot of cases might tend to burn out quicker because of that sensitivity. So, that's not necessarily always the case. Certainly men can burn out just as easily, but that's kind of what I've noticed. I don't know if you've noticed that as well.
Yeah, because men are hunters, right? Women are gatherers. So the hunters are like, I go after the goal and blah, blah, blah. And women sort of take in everything. And so unfortunately, I feel like people, especially females that are clients of mine and me, like, I'm taking in so much information that I need the days to not have anything coming at me in order to understand my creative side and making sure that I'm actually producing something instead of, again, consuming everything. Because when there's emergencies and there's this, I can't get into flow. I mean, not saying men don't do this too, but I can't get into flow. And then I'm so much less productive anyway. So I tell people to try and get in flow, but it's sort of a catch-22. They're like, I know, but I have so many things, right? It's all this stuff. So I love your methodology around that.
Yeah, and what you just said is so important too, because like you said, whether you're male or female, what I love about the Freedom Days is whether somebody does them as a personal or a business Freedom Day, just to have the feeling to have something on your calendar blocked off that just says Freedom Day, and there are no meetings scheduled. Like, you can just be with yourself and your thoughts and like do the things that make you happy, do the visionary things you've always wanted to do as the business owner, and just be and have fun with it and be with it. Like, there's magic happens on my Freedom Days when I'm not even trying to solve a certain problem. It's much like when you go on vacation, like you talked about at the beginning, right? Like, you get some of your best ideas come when you're sipping a margarita on the beach, when you're not even trying to solve it. It's because we've finally slowed down and let our brain think for a second, or let our mind process what we've been trying to solve.
Yes, I call it defragging, right? Like, our brain actually has a chance to defrag. Well, and that's the thing. That's why in the shower we have different, we're doing something else with our body, and we're not necessarily like solely focused. I have to figure this thing out now, because when you put that much pressure on yourself, it makes it almost harder. It makes more resistance to try and figure it out. So people, you can be more effective when you take time off. I know it's so counterintuitive to people that are listening, but please understand. How did you start figuring out what really got you in flow on the Freedom Days? Because usually it's like, ooh, towards your strength. How do you figure out like, ooh, this is going to make me happy, or this isn't?
It's challenging for a lot of people at first. The clients that I've worked with on this, a lot of people are like, I don't know what to do with my free time, Denise. I haven't since I was a kid, like, given myself the space. And so I actually have exercises that I take them through at the beginning that's foundational to our work together. And part of it is reconnecting with what it is that they love doing as a kid that made them happy, what kinds of things they could lose themselves in doing, and look up and it'd be 3 a.m. and you didn't even realize what time it was. Like, I actually make them go through a bunch of those kinds of exercises up front. So we're building a Freedom Day idea bucket. And then when they get to the point where they're like, okay, now you're helping me do my own experiment, you're helping me carve out this time. They're like, I don't know what to do at the time. I'm like, remember that first exercise? Let's pull it back out. And then I'm like, oh, but I don't know how to go take piano lessons, or I don't know how to go get hiking. I'm like, you just schedule it. It's not like it's challenging. Like, their brain hasn't even processed that skill. Like, they're brilliant entrepreneurs, but like, they feel like it's an obstacle to learn how to schedule a piano lesson.
Well, it feels selfish. So this is the thing, right? The overachievers are like, well, if I'm not getting something done, then I'm not valuable or whatever. There's so much head junk that comes around. I know from experience, like, my coach has been making me do more creative things. And I'm like, I know, but like, right? Not saying that I don't get better ideas when I'm doing that stuff and it's defragging, but it still feels so hard to make myself go, and I'm taking more time off, right? Even more than I even think that I'm comfortable with. And that's so interesting that I have to be comfortable with taking time off. This seems stupid, right?
No, not at all. Like you hit on the biggest objection that I hear from every single client I've ever worked with, never fail, including myself. I was the one I had to win over on this first. It's guilt. Yeah. The guilt in our society and our business culture is so deeply rooted. We have been taught that only the hustlers succeed. You've got to grind, grind, grind all the time in order to do anything meaningful. And we mock people who aren't grinding all the time as being lazy. Yet what I finally realized is that it makes no logical sense that if we get as much done in 3 days as we used to in 6, because we're actually being effective with our time and we're prioritizing correctly and we put the right systems in place, there's nothing to feel guilty about, yet we still do. So I literally had to learn to turn the volume down on that little guilt voice, that little creature that was sitting on my, like the angel and the devil, the little devil whispering in your ear, Denise, get back to work, you lazy idiot. The angel's going, Denise, you deserve free time. Well, don't listen to him.
Seriously. And we're like two multiple personalities, right? You're like, are you kidding me?
Right.
But it's insane. Especially, I mean, I had to reschedule the last interview, and I'll be completely open. My former husband has stage 4 inoperable cancer. Right. And when something like that is he's 38. So the amount of life-changing, flipping upside down what actually matters in your life starts to really hit home. And it has these past few weeks for sure. And it does make me go, yeah, money and business. And don't get me wrong, I love what I do. Overachievement, not as important as it was before. And I know you had a crazy personal thing go on too. Is that what really impacted you to sort of shift into this mode?
Yeah, it is. It was, that the incident that happened back in June of 2011 totally made me realize I wasn't living my life in alignment with my real priorities.
Tell us all. Do you mind telling us all about it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, imagine there's this knock. So let me back up for a second. So our house was struck by lightning. There was a boom and a shake. And like my husband and I were up at 8:00 in the morning. We saw the lightning bolt hit the house. And then I had a 5-year-old, my daughter was 5 at the time. She's now a teenager, but like her toys turned on from the energy passing through the room. Welcome to Dora's Playhouse. So anyway, that was freaky by itself. That was just a side note. So we're looking around. We don't know whether we're on fire or not. We just know we were hit by lightning, and we're trying to assess the damage. And then there's this knock on the door. So I go to the front door, and there's a fireman at the door. And he informs us our house is on fire. Our neighbor had called 911 because they thought they were struck by lightning. Our phones weren't working because our whole house was dead because we, knocked the power out, knocked everything out. So my cell phone wouldn't work because it was a nasty storm. Our home phone wouldn't work. So we couldn't call anyone, but we were just trying to figure out the damage. So the fireman says, your house is on fire. And then he asked me the most incredible question I've ever been asked in my life. And sometimes it even brings me to tears when I say the question. It was like, what do you want us to retrieve in the next 5 minutes before your house is destroyed by fire and water? Like, what do you want us to go get? Can you imagine, Jaime, if you were asked that question, like you only had 5 more minutes to set foot in your house again? It's like, what would you grab? It's like, now I already had my computer and my wallet, my daughter, all the family members and the pets, were all safe. So that was all fine. And we could grab the wallet and the laptop. But like knowing that we already had that's the most instinctive thing somebody would grab. But forget about that. Let's say you already got that handled. What else do you grab if you could only go back in your house for 5 more minutes? And it was really eye-opening. It wasn't any of this stuff that you see behind me on the video. For those that are seeing this on video, none of this stuff existed at the time. I bought all this after the fire. But that wasn't what I had them retrieve. And what hit me, Jaime, was that what I had them retrieve was what I didn't have them retrieve that was so eye-opening. I didn't have them go get the jewelry in the jewelry drawer. I didn't have them get the artwork on the wall or the expensive items throughout the house. That's all just things. You can replace things any day of the week, right? Well, I like nice things, but it doesn't define who I am. But what I had them retrieve were my daughter's favorite stuffed animal. At 5, your stuffed animal is a member of the family. Bunny, you got to go get Bunny. We still have Bunny to this day, thanks to the firemen saving Bunny. Wow. My daughter will probably pass Bunny on to her daughter, Yeah. I had them get my wedding photos off the piano and around the house. That's from 25 years ago. I don't have those digitally. That's my wedding with my husband. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary. I had them go get my grandmother's blanket that she made me as a child. It's a patchwork quilt that teaches love and acceptance. She used to tell me a story from it about loving others. And so what do all those 3 things represent? the people in my life that really matter, not the stuff. So long story short, to answer your question about what changed my priorities, I was working 80 hours a week to pay for a bunch of stuff that I didn't even care about when it was burning.
Wow. That is so impactful. And it sucks that you had to go through that, of course, to know those things, but it's so visceral and you so accepted them. So what did you change after that effect? Like besides the vacation effect, I get that piece, but like right afterwards, especially being so dealing with that.
Yeah, so I vowed that day as we were standing there at our neighbor's garage watching our house burn, and the firemen took them like 8 hours to put out the fire, even though it was raining, because it gets into the walls and the crevices, and they have to hack walls to put it out. And so as I'm standing there, it was almost like a slow motion movie where it's your life, but you're like watching somebody else's movie. And I was like that, and I was just standing there going, I'm going to make this the best thing that ever happened to me, like I do with any other challenge I've ever had in my life. I'm always a glass half full kind of person. Like, I'm going to make this the best thing. So I'm like, okay, how am I going to make, I don't know yet how, but I will figure out how to reconcile the fact that it is no longer acceptable to not spend the time that my family deserves. Like, I do not accept that anymore. So that was the one thing I vowed. But I also vowed, I kind of have this this come to Jesus with myself. I reconciled the fact that the stuff that was burning didn't matter to me, but when over my family, they were way more important. But that I also like providing a nice life for my family, but I didn't ever want to have to do it at the expense of my family's time and love. Does that make sense? Like,
oh, totally. Yeah.
It's like that. Like that. It's like reconciling that like that divine dichotomy, or not the divine dichotomy. It's like reconciling that two sides to the coin of like, I like nice things, but money's not everything, but I still like nice things.
Totally.
But I don't want it to come at the expense of me not being there for my family.
Yeah.
So that day I vowed that I was going to, no matter what, have more free time spend more time with my family, but that I was also going to figure out how to have both, how to have free time and still make a good living. Even if I didn't make as much money as before, I didn't care about that. I just still wanted to be able to provide a nice life. So I just started trying to figure out how to make it work. And I failed at a lot of experiments that I tried.
Okay, maybe we'll talk about those in just a second too. Because logically, it's one thing. So people will hear this story and go, logically, I know, of course I know the people in my life are more important, right? But taking the action and making the decisions, and when the rubber hits the road, that's what really matters. So the vows to yourself are amazing, but the fact that you kept the vows to yourself because it was such a life-changing moment. I want everybody listening to not have to have their house burn, or, you know what I mean? And be able to take the weight. Someone. Exactly. Yeah. Take the weight of that and still take the same amount of action, because it's just the belief that you had that change. Nothing, I mean, you lost your stuff too, don't get me wrong, but it was the belief that changed everything in the long run. So what experiments did you try that didn't work? Because I know there's a lot of people that are like, well, I tried so many things, you know, there's all the things that I tried, and you kept going. So what did you try and failed at? Yeah. So the first thing I did was I stopped doing work that I hated, but I was still doing too much of work that I loved. And so I was like, okay, well, this isn't going to work, because I need, I have to have more time with my family. Like I started to fall back into that pattern of, not taking the time off that I had wanted. So then I took off more time, and I took a year where I didn't really do much. And I made very little money, the least money in my life, as a professional. I still had the businesses where we had business income and stuff, but my services income had gone down versus like the passive income. But it's like, I was like, oh, okay. So now my income went down when I was just taking time off and not really doing much. Because doing much other than, like, don't get me wrong, we were like buying a new house and negotiating all of that and doing personal stuff, getting ourselves established, but I wasn't working in any of the companies. So it was like, or not much. So my income dropped. I'm used to, we normally grow 7 figures in our companies. And that 1 year, it dipped to less than 7 figures. Like, I normally make over $500,000 in just one of my companies by itself, not counting all of them combined. And like that year, it made like 90,000 when it normally makes $500,000. How does that make you feel? Because that's the other piece. Because that sucks to go down. I mean, I know you went through a huge strategy, but still, it hurts your self-worth to be like, even though I know I didn't work, but now I'm making less. And for overachieving entrepreneurs, it's tough.
And at that point, I was thankful because I had a large insurance settlement check that was more than paying for it. So it's not like I was doing it and I didn't have any money. Yeah. But I needed a break. I was so burned out, Jaime. I just needed a break. And I'm like, that thinking time, I finally was like, okay, this clearly isn't working though, because I'm not working in those service businesses. So the income's not coming in. My other passive income was still coming in. So that's, good that we had that and we had the insurance money. But so I hit each end of the spectrum. I'm like, okay, I learned that if I work too much, my family suffers. If I don't work enough, I don't make enough money. So I'm like, surely there's a better way. And that's when what led me to going to that meditation retreat and saying, how can I have the schedule I've always wanted without my income tanking? And the answer I got was all you have to do is make today what you want tomorrow to be. And so I then did that scheduling experiment, and that led me to figuring out the rest of it by trial and error. So there's 9 components that I figured out. We've already talked about 3 of them of the 9. We talked about the number 1, which is the forced hyper-efficiency, limiting the amount of time that you're willing to work so that you force yourself to get things done faster like you do when you're about to go on vacation. Number 2 is freedom days, where you give yourself some space so that you then are more calm and able to solve problems where you're not even trying to. And then, number 3 is goal setting, proper goal setting. And number 4 is time hacking. We've actually talked a little bit about those first 4. When you do the goal process that I talked about, step 1 and the step 2, the Pareto analysis and the hacking the hack, and then you apply those time hacks. Time hacking is 4 of my 9 prongs. Like you're already like 40-50% of the way there, and doing what needs to be done in order to be able to grow your business and work half as much. I call that grow by subtraction. Grow by shedding things from your to-do list. It's like the balloon floating in the air and you're like cutting weights so that you go higher.
Oh,
If you think about that analogy, the balloon floating into the air higher and higher, grow by subtraction by doing less. But, like the other things that I figured out that I still had to do in order to let the business keep growing, even when I wasn't there as much, was I really had to dial in my policies and procedures. I had to dial in my automation of like, if you find yourself repeating certain activities over and over again, or typing your name, address, email, phone number over and over again, have a keyboard shortcut for stuff like that. Like having delegation that you're good at. Like just because we delegate doesn't mean we're good at it.
Mm-hmm. Seriously.
Just because we delegate doesn't mean we delegate enough. And on the delegation point, a huge hack that I did that I think people will find helpful is I actually have a 24-hour operation now, and it's not expensive to do. Like even people that are just in business 3 to 5 years can do this. Like I have U.S. assistants and I have a Filipino assistant, and like literally right now I've got somebody who could type something up for me or do what research that I needed. And like right before I go to bed, I task my Filipino VA with wherever my US team left off that I still want done. And when I wake up, it's done. And then my US team picks it back up. Like you literally can just shift the money that you're already spending so that you're covered 24/7 or 24/5, depending on what you want that to be, and not spend any more money than you're already spending. And like, imagine the speed you can implement things by having a 24-hour operation.
That's all. I talk about speed of implementation all the time, because the faster we can make that wheel turn, the better it is. Tell me a little bit, especially for people that don't have a really big team right now, because that's the other piece. Like you're a lawyer. So technically you trade time for money, but what does your team look like? And did you have to build it out? And how many hours? Because a lot of people will be like, okay, but I'm a service-based business and therefore I need me or my secret sauce or whatever it is.
Yeah. So I have 3 different companies. My law firm's one of them. The Vacation Effect is another. That's my entrepreneurial coaching and training company. And then my real estate company. Across those 3 companies, I have 12 team members. So my law firm, I have 3. My coaching and training company, I have 4. And then in my real estate company, we have like 7. The math may be off, something along those lines. But so like that basically, I'm able to, I didn't always have that many people. Like even when I was first starting, I had one person that was helping me. Even just having a VA, in the Philippines or another country, US or otherwise, it doesn't matter. Just you can afford an assistant, and you really can't afford not to have an assistant unless you want to have no quality of life for yourself.
Right. I mean,
you can have an assistant for as little as $200 a month, even if they're helping you part-time.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? And getting an assistant so that you do get good at delegating, because that's something that as a business owner, you're always going to want to have long term. So how do you actually find, so $200 is a easy amount of money, and yet finding the right person for that type, because then if they're not good managers or good delegators yet anyway, then the whole thing will add more issue than relief, right? Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah. So, if you go the route with hiring in the Philippines, for example, like what I've done, I've always used a site called onlinejobs.ph. They're a Filipino resource, but like I will typically give two or three people, two or three candidates whose resumes that I liked and I had a good interaction with them and the email interaction process went well. They followed my instructions. I always tell them to email me back with a certain subject line and with their resume attached and three sentences about what they want, why they think they'd be a good fit for the job. And if they can't even follow those basic instructions, how are they ever going to be able to follow my instructions, in general? But the ones that I end up interviewing because they followed my instructions, I give all three of them a test task and I offer to pay them for the test task. Like, I might offer to pay them depending on how detailed it is. Like the average wage in the Philippines is $3 to $4 an hour, depending upon their skill set. So like, if I think it's going to take them 3 hours, I might offer them $10 for the task or $15 for the task, and I'll send it to them by PayPal. But like, I'm paying them whether or not I hire them or not. And so you end up getting three different examples of, the quality of that person's work. And then I end up proceeding with the one that does the best job. Okay. And then, so that's an example. You can do that with whatever service you end up using.
And you'll hire them like
it's all about experimenting.
Yeah. So and I have team members in the Philippines also. And do you hire them like part-time, and have they been with you for a long period of time? I know just people go back and forth. Do I hire in the US or do I hire there? And especially if they're not good managers, sometimes it's harder to have them manage up, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I actually have team members in both places. I have staff in the US and then I have one that's in the Philippines. Okay. But I also have a programmer in the Philippines I've worked with for like 8 years that he's just part-time whenever I need changes to one of my company's websites. My VA, she's full-time. She's like 30 hours a week. I'm splitting her with one of my friends who needed a part-time VA. She's awesome. I'll pay her full-time if I have to, even if I only need her for 20 hours because she's so awesome. That's what I do with her. Even if I don't have enough work for her, I still pay her full salary because I don't want her wandering anywhere else.
Yeah, because once you find somebody that's good, you're like, okay, I need to retain you. Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. And but so it just depends on what I need them to do. Some of them I work with part-time and some of them full-time.
How do you figure out what you're actually doing on your 3 days? Is it all meetings, or is it like, how do you figure out your project plan and how much you're actually getting done?
Yeah. So for me, I have it scheduled so that my meetings are all in the afternoons, and then in the morning it's focus time to do work product.
Okay.
So like client calls are in the afternoons, but that's just how I do it. That's just based upon my own unique workflow.
Yeah. Is it 8 hours a day, or how long are your Monday, Wednesday, Fridays?
8 to 10 hours. Like me right now, I literally have been off 4 of the last 6 weeks. So because I ended up having 2 weeks off for Christmas and New Year's. And then I took 2 1-week trips with 2 of my CEO mastermind groups. We went to Costa Rica and we went to Mexico. And those were like vacations. I wasn't really working. So now I'm trying to get done like work that needs to be done. So I'm working 10 to 12-hour days right now for the next week because I have to shift my schedule around based upon travel.
Yeah, because you took time off. So therefore.
Yeah, exactly. I took 2-week vacation already in January. So guess what? Now I've got to work, 5 days and 5 days for the other 2 weeks in January. But I got my 2-week vacation.
Yeah.
I did it in bulk instead of here and there.
Well, how do you determine what you're going to push farther down the pipeline also, right? So when vacations or whatever comes up, it's like, do I just squish the time and I try and get it all done in a shorter period of time? Or are you cool with pushing off deadlines a little bit and going slower, get a slower pace? That a lot of people, especially we talk about speed of implementation, and they're like, well, I don't want to push things off either.
Right. Yeah. So for me, I'm glad you're touching on this because I've decided I wanted to live life with ease and grace and not with a lot of stress. Yeah. So I'm okay with pushing things off. Most of the time, there are times when it just can't and it like really needs to be done. But like, as long as my client is okay with pushing it off, like my own self-imposed deadlines, if I need to push it off, I'd rather have sanity. I'd rather have time with my family. I'd rather have the free days built in. If I need to push it off another week, it's not a big deal. And even with clients, I've learned that the stuff that these self-imposed demands that we put on ourselves are not usually what the client even expects. Like we put so much on ourselves that's false. So what I mean by that is I had to learn to free myself from the judgments of others and what I thought were the judgments of others. And that's a big one. Like, I don't know about you, but like I get a lot of emails, and just because somebody emailed me, a client or otherwise, does not make it an obligation for me to meet what they were asking for. Just because they email me does not make it a to-do on my end.
Yeah, definitely.
If I haven't agreed to that or committed to that, or if I haven't been paid for that, I'm not obligated. Like it's just a to-do list is like a suggestion. I mean, my email is like a suggestion. It's like, these are things other people are asking me to do that I get to negotiate how I'm going to handle them. I stopped letting it dictate my life. And people think that if we are asked to do a call with the client on a day that's a freedom, a day that we've got set aside for ourselves, that they'll be mad if we somehow say no. Like when you guys asked me if I could chat on a day and I said, well, that doesn't work for me, how's Monday or Wednesday work for you? Did you think for a second, oh, she's lazy?
I know, right?
No, of course not.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, cool. She's busy and that's the best time for her. Like, I don't owe anyone an explanation. Yeah. Listeners, you do not owe anyone an explanation for the space you've carved out for yourself. Just give them the next available window.
Yeah. Self-imposed
That was a
pressure.
big shift. Yeah. Free yourself from the judgments of others. Most of the time, they don't care anyway. Well, that was a big epiphany for me.
Yeah, this level of excellence that we hold. It's like, okay, well, then I have to do everything for everyone, self-imposed timeline, self-imposed level of excellence, and that creates stress. So what is it? Tell me about your life before and how stressful it was versus now. Because I feel like people that are going through it right now feel this pressure and stress that they don't even realize is self-imposed, right? There's just small decisions that you're saying these are small decisions, and yet the people that are listening won't actually make these decisions. So tell me about the before and the after of your stress levels.
Yeah. So the analogy I used to give my team members, with every little interruption they would give me, and I would be like, don't interrupt me unless it's urgent. Like it's the flow. I'm like, I feel like there are a million arrows coming at me. Like, I don't know if people can relate to, like, there's things that, like, the phone's buzzing, the bing, the Skype's dinging, the emails are coming in. It's like, I used to feel like all these arrows were coming at me. And it's because I was letting them get to me.
Yes.
Like, I was letting other people's agendas like dictate my life. And I finally had to free myself, what I was saying a minute ago, free myself from the judgments of others. So like now, it's not that those things aren't still happening. Like, I don't get as many alerts because I've turned off almost every notification on my cell phone. I've turned it off, other than text messages when I'm receiving, when I'm real willing to receive text messages. Like right now I'm in do not disturb. Like I can't receive a message because I don't want you and I to be interrupted. But like, so I control that. I don't have as many notifications going on, and I don't go into email. I don't live in email all day long. And I basically use email as a database. It's a database of information that I go to when there's something I need to look for. But it's not my to-do list. It's not my, commitment list. It's my database of information. If a client and I have agreed, I'm going to go grab a file that they sent me, I'm going to go to email and grab the file. It's not my to-do list of what I have to work on today. So, but the big thing, Jaime, was just making the mindset shift that, you know what, even if somebody doesn't like my schedule and they think I'm lazy, I'll be okay if I lose them as a client. And I haven't, but if I ever do, I'll still be okay. And they're not the kind of client I want to work with anyway, if they're so worried about me having a quality of life that they would not want me because of it.
Yes, you're putting yourself and your self-care first, and that way you can give back and be more present with your family, I'm sure. Have you really noticed the difference with your family time also?
Yeah, like I was able to be with my dad a year and a half ago, right before he passed away. He was in the hospital for 6 months on and off right before he died. And like, I was able to go see him like 4 days a week and, just sit with him for hours and hours at a time. And like the old version of me would have never had the time to do that.
Yeah.
Like,
or checking the phone while you were in the hospital, right? Like crazy stuff like that, and not being present like you really know you needed to. Wow. That's awesome.
Like, no, what I finally figured out was that as long as I had a spot for everything to fit work-wise, I put my life first, my freedom first, my happiness first. I worked my business around it. People say that, put your family and yourself first and wrap your business around it, but doing it's not always easy, as I found. I fumbled around for 5 years trying to figure it out. But what finally made it work was I had to make a space for everything in the business so that I could get it done, even putting myself first, if that makes sense. So that's where now I have a compartment. Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, in my particular example, I have a space to get the work product done. I have a space for meetings. I have a team that can implement the different drafts of things that I need done because I've got them to delegate it to. If I didn't have them to delegate it to, I would just shift those buckets accordingly. And I've got a spot for it. So Tuesday, when I have my freedom day, I don't need to stress about it because I know I've got a compartment. I've got that emergency buffer from 2 to 4, which I rarely need. And I know I've got all day Wednesday where I've got those compartments. It's like, as long as you've got a space for it, just like ignore all the rest of that noise and the arrows don't need to come at you anymore.
Yes.
I hope that makes sense.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
And especially for moms, I'm a mom also, to be able to go family first is easy, right? Oh, family first, totally. And then business and then self typically, right? And so you as a mom, you get like the last little breadcrumb left for yourself. And then, and then you're like, I want to die. This sucks. I'm so exhausted. But you're doing it to yourself. and it's hard to hear that, but it's really cool to hear your story where you really did put things back in the right order. And you're getting everything done, right? And being able to feel like you're achieving things also. Because we don't want to hear the story of, I put my family and myself first, and then I just am making a lot less money. You're like, great, that's awesome. And we really want to have both sides of that coin that you were talking about before. I know we have to, were you going to say something?
And I was just going to say, and I'll be okay even if I do make less money because I'll never go back to my old ways again. Exactly. But thankfully that hasn't happened. But if it ever did, I still wouldn't change because it's totally worth it.
Well, exactly. And you're set in that anyway. And it's all mindset and belief anyway, because money isn't everything. Who knew, right? I know we have to start wrapping up. So what is one action listeners can take this week to help move them forward towards their goal of $1 million?
So I would recommend that they do a 30-day experiment like I was talking about. And even a 30-day experiment where you pick ideally 8 business days for the month that you give yourself for just joy activities, whatever brings you joy that day. And even if you don't want to do it forever, like what I'm talking about, I know a lot of listeners may be hesitant to do that. That's totally fine. But the reason for doing the experiment is to literally figure out where you're the bottleneck in the company, to figure out where you're not being efficient with your time, where you're not delegating, where you'd benefit from delegating more, where you're being lax with your meetings and how you're spending your time. So I recommend a 30-day time experiment just for the purpose of making yourself more productive. So even if you want to go back to working 6 days a week after that, you're more effective in what you do. And I hope you get the bug like I did and you actually decide that, you know what, I kind of like having these freedom days. I wouldn't mind having a reduced work schedule now that I've tasted this. So
I just want to bump that in everybody's mindset. One of the reasons why I make my clients take vacations is you get to see what breaks when you come back. And when you come back and you go, oh, now I have to fix it. It's not the end of the world. You now know what rose to the top. You fix it. You go on vacation again, or you take another freedom day, people. It's not rocket science. It's just a little bit of out of your comfort zone and a little bit of pain.
Yeah, and you're going to feel guilty.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're going to feel guilty, and that's okay. That's normal because you're learning to turn down that dial and just tell yourself, if I can learn how to get as much done as 6 as I did, and 3 as I used to, and 6, is there really anything to feel guilty about? And that's what I'm learning here.
I love it. All right. Where can we find more about you online?
Yeah, so the best place would be vacationeffect.com. That's vacation effect with an EFFECT.com. And on that website, I've got a lot of free resources. A free copy of my book summary is being loaded there, and my podcast is there as well. Awesome. So
definitely check out her podcast because I think I'll be on it also. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening and investing in yourself with your time. I so appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be forever grateful if you would be willing to leave a rating or review in whatever app you use for your podcast. I know that's what really bumps it up in the rankings. And I would so appreciate your time, especially if you've been a long time listener. But of course, if you like this episode and you're brand new, thank you for being here too. Have an amazing, amazing day.